over by a reindeer.
A truck stops at a red light in some forgotten town, radio hissing between stations, and then, there it is. A song everybody knows.
Hi, what's doing? Whoa, sit down, I got some bad.
A voice everybody recognizes. A name almost nobody remembers. That's the strange curse of country music's one-hit wonders. Men and women who wrote the soundtrack to a generation's kitchen tables and pickup trucks, then watched someone else cash the check. Tonight, we count down 10 artists who gave country music one unforgettable song, and we're left with almost nothing to show for it. Before we start, hit subscribe, because by the end of this list, you'll never hear these songs the same way again. And the story waiting at number 1 involves a death so strange, so tied to fate, that Nashville still whispers about it. The countdown begins now.
When we found her Christmas morning.
Number 10, Henson Cargill, Skip a Rope, 1967.
Now ain't it kinda funny what the children say?
Picture a living room in 1967. Wood paneling on the walls, a console radio glowing amber in the corner. A father and mother are arguing in the kitchen. Their child sits on the carpet, quietly listening, learning the words to a game before they learn the words to kindness. That was the world Henson Cargill's Skip a Rope walked into. A country song that didn't sound like country music at all. It sounded like a warning.
Now ain't it kinda funny what the children say? Skip a rope.
Cargill wasn't a songwriter. He was a rancher's son from Oklahoma, with a deep, unshowy voice, handed a song written by Jack Moran and Glenn Tubb about children absorbing their parents' cruelty and prejudice like a second language. It became the first country song in years to top the charts, while making listeners genuinely uncomfortable, daring to talk about racism, divorce, and hatred passed down at the dinner table.
Sister, another bad dream.
The record made Cargill famous overnight. Television appearances, a Grammy nomination, a song that critics still call one of the boldest moments in country music history. But because Cargill hadn't written a single word of it, when the airplay checks were drawn up, they went almost entirely to two men most listeners had never heard of.
Taxes, don't be a fool.
Cargill spent the rest of his career chasing that same lightning, recording steadily into the 1970s, respected but never repeated. He became a rancher again, a sheriff's deputy, a man who occasionally got recognized in a feed store for a song he didn't write and barely profited from.
Skip a rope.
Publishing rights on Skip a Rope were locked in before Cargill ever set foot in the studio. Industry contracts of that era routinely classified performers as for-hire vocalists, meaning the man whose voice made the record legendary owned no piece of the words that made it matter. He'd go on to say in later interviews that he loved the song too much to resent it. Not everyone on this list will be able to say the same.
Now what was that they said about a gold in the room?
And if you think that's the last time a Nashville songwriter quietly out-earned the artist standing in the spotlight, wait until you hear what happened to a blind singer from Georgia who almost never got her chance at all.
Skip a rope. Skip a
Number 9, Terri Gibbs, Somebody's Knockin', 1980. There's a particular kind of dark that isn't about the lights being off. It's the dark Terri Gibbs lived in every day of her life. Blind since infancy, she learned piano by ear in Augusta, Georgia, playing in smoky lounges long before Nashville ever knew her name. When Somebody's Knockin' hit radio in 1980, it felt like a thunderclap, a sultry, gospel-tinged warning about temptation standing at your door. delivered by a voice that sounded like it had already survived something.
Somebody's knocking. Should I live?
The song crossed over from country to pop charts, an almost impossible feat, and suddenly Terri Gibbs was a headline name, performing on national television, nominated for a Grammy against artists twice her fame. For a woman who had spent years being told the industry wasn't built for someone like her, it felt like vindication.
I've heard about him, but I never.
But vindication and compensation are not the same thing. Behind the scenes, Gibbs's contract with her label locked her into unfavorable royalty terms typical of new artists in that era. An era where labels routinely recouped promotional costs, video costs, even studio costs directly from an artist's earnings before a single royalty dollar reached their pocket. She kept recording, kept touring. Her voice never dimmed, but Somebody's Knockin' became one of those songs that made millions for a company while making a comfortable, unspectacular living for the woman who sang it. Gibbs has spoken candidly in later interviews about how little control she had over her own contract terms in 1980. Signed by a young, blind artist with limited industry guidance, negotiating against experienced label attorneys. It's a pattern we're going to see again and again tonight. The newer the artist, the smaller the print, the larger the cost.
Would you look at him?
Coming up, a mountain, a song, and a business partner who was also the man managing the singer's entire career. What happens when the person protecting your interests is also the one profiting from taking them?
I don't wanna go wrong.
Number 8. Claude King, Wolverton Mountain, 1962. There's a mountain in Arkansas that doesn't officially exist on modern maps under that name, but for 6 weeks in 1962, it was the most famous piece of geography in America. Claude King's booming baritone told the story of Clifton Clowers, a real mountain man so protective of his daughter that suitors risked their lives just approaching. It was folklore turned into a smash hit, a song that sold over 1 million copies and made King a star. What audiences didn't know was that the co-writer credited alongside King, Merle Kilgore, wasn't just a songwriter. Kilgore was also deeply embedded in the business side of country music. A man who would go on to co-write Ring of Fire for Johnny Cash and eventually manage some of the biggest names in the genre, including Hank Williams Jr. For King, the arrangement felt like partnership. In practice, it meant the man who helped write his signature song also had far more industry leverage, far more connections, and far more downstream opportunities than King himself. As Kilgore's career expanded into management and publishing empires, King's spotlight began to dim, and by the late 1960s he was largely a nostalgia act, performing a song whose ownership had never fully belonged to him. Kilgore would go on to earn far more from decades of publishing royalties, career management fees, and industry relationships than King ever saw from Wolverton Mountain itself. King, the voice that made the mountain famous, spent his later years running a talent agency of his own, helping other artists navigate the very system that had quietly outmaneuvered him. Next, a song about being invisible, sung by a woman who almost became exactly that.
Well, maybe that explains the last 2 weeks.
Number 7. Sylvia Nobody, 1982.
I asked who with, you said nobody.
Close your eyes and imagine a woman standing in an empty apartment in 1982, the phone not ringing, waiting on a man who has stopped calling. That loneliness became Nobody, a slow-burning, sensual country hit that turned a former secretary from Kokomo, Indiana, into a genuine pop crossover star. Sylvia Kirby, performing under the single name Sylvia, became one of the few country artists of the early 80s to hit #1 on the pop charts as well. Her label, RCA, poured resources into her image, her sound, her crossover appeal. For a moment, she was positioned as the next great country pop bridge, a woman who could out-glamour Nashville and outsell pop radio at the same time. But the same machine that built her stardom controlled nearly every creative decision behind it. Her sound, her image, even the songs she was allowed to record. When Sylvia pushed for more creative control following Nobody's success, she found herself fighting a label uninterested in letting an artist, especially a woman, dictate her own direction. The hits that followed never matched Nobody's heights. By the mid-1980s, Sylvia had largely stepped back from major label country music altogether, choosing artistic independence over chart dominance. Sylvia has spoken about how little ownership she had over her own artistic identity during her peak years. A manufactured look, a manufactured sound, decisions about her career made in boardrooms she wasn't invited into. Nobody became her legacy. Ironically, it also became the most accurate description of how much say she truly had in her own story. But at least Sylvia's song began as a hit. Our next story begins as an advertising jingle for bread, and somehow becomes a cultural phenomenon nobody, including the man who sang it, was prepared for.
Dark of the moon on the 6th of June in a Kenworth full of logs.
Number 6. C.W. McCall, Convoy, 1975. Somewhere on an American highway in the mid-1970s, truckers are talking to each other through crackling CB radios, inventing a secret language of their own. Into that culture rolled Convoy, a trucking anthem so catchy it briefly hijacked pop culture entirely, inspiring a feature film and turning citizens band radio slang into household vocabulary.
For sure. By golly, it's clean, clear to black.
But C.W. McCall wasn't really C.W. McCall. He was Bill Fries, an advertising executive from Omaha who had created the character years earlier for a bread company commercial. The gravel-voiced trucker persona belonged, technically and legally, to the advertising agency and the bread company that commissioned him, not entirely to Fries himself. When Convoy exploded into a #1 hit, Fries found himself famous as a character he didn't fully own, tangled in agreements originally designed for 30-second commercials, not chart-topping singles and Hollywood film deals. Co-writer Chip Davis, meanwhile, went on to found the massively successful group Mannheim Steamroller, turning industry connections built partly through Convoy into a decades-long empire. Fries did eventually gain more control, later becoming mayor of Aurora, Colorado, beloved locally, remembered nationally for one enormous novelty hit, whose full financial upside he never fully captured. The bread company that originally commissioned the C.W. McCall character held commercial rights to the persona itself, meaning the very identity behind one of country music's biggest crossover hits was, in the beginning, corporate property. Fries built a beloved career and a respected legacy in local politics. He simply never got to own the character that made him a household name.
Across the line, I could see the bridge was lined with bears, but
Speaking of characters built by someone else, our next story involves a Christmas song so infectious it's still played every December, written not by the performers who made it famous, but by a man they barely knew.
Grandma got run over by a reindeer.
Number 5. Elmo and Patsy. Grandma got run over by a reindeer, 1979.
Grandma got run over by a reindeer.
Every December, radio stations across America play a novelty song about a grandmother trampled by Santa's sleigh, and most listeners assume the two people singing it wrote it, own it, and got rich from it. The truth is stranger and sadder. Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer was written entirely by songwriter Randy Brooks. The husband and wife duo who performed it, Elmo Shropshire and Patsy Trigg, were simply the voices that made it a Christmas radio staple.
Walking home from our house Christmas Eve.
The song became an annual phenomenon, re-released year after year, generating royalties that added up over decades into millions of dollars. But because Brooks held the songwriting rights, and because Elmo and Patsy's arrangement with him limited their share to performance royalties rather than ownership, the financial windfall never matched the song's cultural footprint in their own bank accounts.
Not Christmas without Grandma.
Making matters more painful, Elmo and Patsy divorced not long after recording it. What followed was years of legal wrangling, not over parenting or property, but over control of who got to keep performing, licensing, and profiting from a song about a dead grandmother that neither of them had actually written.
You can say there's no such thing as
For years, Elmo Shropshire fought in court simply for the right to keep singing the song publicly under the name people knew, spending more in legal fees defending his connection to Grandma than most one-hit wonders ever earned from their master hit, A Christmas Classic, A Shattered Marriage, a songwriter who quietly collected the real fortune. Next, a story about a Mississippi Delta and a Southern Gothic mystery so haunting that even today, nobody agrees on what actually happened in that song. What audiences do agree on is what happened to the woman who wrote it.
As for me and Grandpa, we believe.
Number 4. Bobbie Gentry, Ode to Billie Joe, 1967.
Was the 3rd of June, another.
There's a bridge in Mississippi, the Tallahatchie, where something was thrown into the water in the summer of 1967, at least according to the song. Nobody, including songwriter Bobbie Gentry herself, ever fully confirmed what. That mystery, wrapped in a slow, haunting Southern Gothic melody, became one of the most captivating singles of the decade, outselling even the Beatles the week it was released.
Yesterday on Choctaw Ridge.
Gentry wasn't just the performer. She wrote every word, played guitar, and initially received full songwriting credit. But behind the scenes, her producer Kelly Gordon was added as co-writer on the record's paperwork, a common industry practice at the time, sometimes justified as arrangement contribution, sometimes simply as leverage taken from artists with less power in the room.
Frog down the back at the Carroll County.
That co-writing credit meant Gordon received a permanent cut of publishing royalties for a song he didn't write. For Gentry, an artist who wrote, produced, and even directed elements of her own image, at a time when women rarely had that kind of control, it was a quiet erosion of ownership over the very thing that made her a legend.
Been cooking all morning and you haven't touched a single.
Gentry's story ends in one of the strangest final acts in music history. At the height of her fame, In the late 1970s, she simply disappeared from public life entirely, declining nearly all interviews and appearances for the rest of her life, reportedly frustrated by an industry that had never fully respected her authorship.
Come and gone since we heard the news about little Joe.
To this day, Bobbie Gentry has never publicly confirmed what was thrown off the Tallahatchie Bridge, and many close to her believe her silence about the song's meaning mirrors her silence about the industry that quietly diluted her ownership of it. She wrote one of the most analyzed songs in American music history. She never got to fully own what it became.
Something off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
But if you think losing a producer credit is painful, wait until you hear what happened to the woman who sang about a house catching fire, a song written by the very man she was married to. Number 3. Vicki Lawrence, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, 1972.
Have him a drink before he went home to her.
A small southern town, a courtroom, a secret buried in the dark. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia played like a 3-minute murder mystery, and it turned Vicki Lawrence, better known at the time as a comedic actress on The Carol Burnett Show, into an unlikely #1 country and pop star.
He didn't live far, see, and he didn't have many friends, and he just...
The song was written by Bobby Russell, Lawrence's husband at the time. Russell had already found success writing hits for other artists, and when he needed a vocalist for a demo, Lawrence stepped in, almost by accident, almost as a favor, never expecting the recording to become the actual single.
Said guilty in a make-believe trial, slapped the sheriff on the back.
When it became a massive hit, Lawrence found herself in an uncomfortable financial position that many spouses in the industry quietly experienced. She was the voice, the face, the performer who toured and promoted the song, while Russell, as sole songwriter, held the publishing rights and the far larger financial upside.
Child's got bloodstains on his hands.
Lawrence has spoken candidly in later interviews about how little she personally profited from a song most Americans still associate directly with her voice. She returned largely to television and comedy, most famously as Mama on Mama's Family, a career she has said felt more genuinely, financially hers than the song that made her briefly a music star.
He saw while on his way to Andy's house and back.
Because Lawrence and Russell divorced years later, the publishing royalties from one of the most recognizable story songs in American music history remained entirely with her ex-husband's estate, meaning the woman whose voice is inseparable from the song, in the ears of millions of listeners, has spent decades with almost no financial stake in it at all. Next, the story that started this entire genre of scandal, a school teacher's fictional revenge against small-town hypocrisy, sung by a woman who was, in real life, the one being taken advantage of. Number 2. Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA, 1968.
He said, Mama got a note here from the Harper Valley PT.
A widow gets called into the principal's office because the town's most respectable families disapprove of how she dresses, how she lives, who she is. Instead of apologizing, she exposes every one of their secrets in front of the entire PTA. That was the fictional Mrs. Johnson. In real life, Jeannie C. Riley, a 21-year-old secretary turned singer from Texas, became the voice that delivered that takedown to the entire country, and somehow ended up living a version of the same story herself.
This town and should.
Harper Valley PTA became a phenomenon almost instantly, selling millions of copies, winning a Grammy, eventually inspiring both a film and a television series. Riley became the first woman to win the Country Music Association's Single of the Year award. For a moment, she was the biggest name in the format.
You're all Harper Valley hypocrites.
But the song was written entirely by Tom T. Hall, one of Nashville's most respected songwriters, and Riley's arrangement with her label reportedly paid her a flat session fee for recording it, an extremely common practice for vocalists in that era who weren't credited as writers. As Harper Valley PTA generated enormous ongoing publishing revenue for Hall and the label for decades, Riley's financial upside was capped almost entirely at the moment the tape stopped rolling.
Whitta Jones be told to keep her window shades off.
Riley also found herself trapped by the song's persona in a deeply personal way. Audiences and even her own label began expecting her to embody the same brassy, scandalous character from the lyrics, pressuring her image in directions that clashed with her private Christian faith. She would later speak publicly about feeling exploited, not just financially, but personally, packaged into a character built by other people's decisions.
And Mrs. Taylor sure seems to use a lot of ice whenever.
Riley has stated in interviews that she received a flat fee of scale rate session pay for recording one of the best-selling singles of the decade, while the song's true financial engine, its publishing rights, never belonged to her at all. She gave the character her voice. Tom T. Hall's estate still profits to this day from the words,
Your little girl this way.
And now, the story we promised you at the very beginning. A #1 hit, a tragic death eerily tied to another country music legend's fate, and a family left to pick up the pieces of a fortune that never fully arrived.
Wearing your dress is way too high.
Number 1. Johnny Horton, The Battle of New Orleans, 1959.
Trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little.
There's a kind of fame that arrives right before tragedy, as if the universe is granting one final, blinding moment of light before the dark. That's the story of Johnny Horton. In 1959, his rollicking historical anthem, The Battle of New Orleans, became one of the biggest-selling singles of the decade, a song so catchy it made American history homework fun for an entire generation of children. Horton didn't write it. Songwriter and folklorist Jimmy Driftwood had penned the lyrics years earlier as a teaching tool for his history students, setting them to an old fiddle tune. When Horton recorded it, the song exploded into a cultural phenomenon, earning a Grammy for Song of the Year and cementing Horton as one of country music's rising superstars.
Fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the.
But the songwriting royalties belonged to Driftwood, not Horton. And Horton, unlike some others on this list, never got the decades to build wealth around his fame that most artists count on. Because just over a year after the song's release, at the absolute height of his career, Johnny Horton was killed in a car accident in Milano, Texas, at only 35 years old.
Catch 'em on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
Here's where the story turns genuinely eerie. Horton's wife, Billie Jean, had previously been married to another country music giant who also died tragically young, Hank Williams. Two of country music's most iconic voices, both married at different times to the same woman, both dead before 40. Horton had reportedly told friends and bandmates in his final months that he had a premonition he wouldn't live much longer, even requesting specific safety changes to his tour schedule that ultimately weren't enough to save him.
Fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the.
His sudden death left his family navigating an estate built primarily around performance royalties rather than songwriting ownership, meaning much of the long-term financial engine of the Battle of New Orleans continued generating wealth for Driftwood's estate for decades, while Horton's own family had to rebuild without him, and largely without the song's deeper financial upside.
As many as there was a while ago, we fired once more and they began.
Johnny Horton never lived to see the full cultural legacy of his biggest hit, a song still taught in classrooms, still played at 4th of July celebrations, more than 60 years later. He gave America one of its most enduring pieces of musical history education, and the industry paperwork ensured his own family saw only a fraction of what that legacy was actually worth.
Catch 'em on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
10 songs, 10 voices, 10 people who gave this country something it still hums in kitchens and pickup trucks decades later, and 10 reminders that a hit song is like a letter mailed to a future you'll never get to meet, addressed to an audience the artist rarely gets to fully collect from. If tonight moved you, tell us in the comments which story hit hardest, and subscribe. Because we are not done uncovering the voices behind the legends. There are more stories waiting, more names history nearly erased. The music never lies, even when the industry does.
From our house Christmas Eve, you can